What's the most shocking detail from the Epstein files that you think the public still doesn't fully grasp? That they withheld the files related to torture and death cases. Meaning there are files related to torture and death cases. That they release the names and faces of the victims but fight tooth and nail to protect the suspects. And nudes of the victims, apparently. That both Epstein and Maxwell were both accused and essentially convicted of child trafficking, but we aren't allowed to find who they were trafficked to. That there are probably 20 more Epsteins out there doing the exact same thing with the same people, and they don't care that we know now. That only Maxwell is in prison. In a cushy minimum security prison, at that, and being given access to things that regular prisoners aren't. Well, yeah, that's what money buys. Also bought her silence. But in time, she will squeal and then mysteriously die and be on the same island as Jeffrey is right now. Leon Black shows up multiple times in victims' writing, naming him as an abuser. Yet he paid a $62.5 million settlement to the Virgin Islands for immunity in the investigation into Epstein's network. Where is this guy? For me, it's that all those crazy conspiracy theorists from the 90s and early noughties were right about the rich elites being evil pedophiles. Makes me wonder about reptilians. That we're seeing the tiniest fraction of what the Epstein files even are. It's 14 terabytes. The Epstein files are videos. The FBI seized hundreds of recordings and photos. And even that was only part of what was there. Pam Bondi herself has said it includes child abuse. Even though Epstein is dead, that material is still prima facie evidence of child abuse. The FBI has had it for almost 7 years. Obviously, they can't release recordings of child abuse. But what are they doing about identifying the victims and abusers in that material? How many have been identified and how many are yet to be identified? That's the Epstein list I want to see. Pam Bondi herself has said it includes child abuse. Wonder who is in those photos. Probably wouldn't just be the children, but the perpetrators too. Obviously, they can't release recordings of child abuse. But what are they doing about identifying the victims and abusers in that material? It is weird, isn't it? There must be photo evidence of many abusers, but they were not charged. How? I was never convinced that Epstein was killed. I was never against the idea, but it always seemed people jumped to that conclusion too easily and too quickly. But now, after everything that happened, I'm sure he didn't willingly die. He was killed or pressured into killing himself. The risk Epstein posed to people in power was too great to let him live. The things he could have revealed would crumble countries. For example, I just learned that Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem sent a photo of Angela Merkel when she was a child at the beach, probably naked, as was common and normal in Eastern Germany at the time, to Epstein. Very fucked up. Can you imagine what they did that they wouldn't share over email? That this is only about half of it. That they deemed acceptable to release while it's still being heavily redacted. That nobody is being prosecuted and that the wealthy and influential are all gonna get away with it. No one is gonna do a day in prison. That out of all these men raping kids, the only person who is currently in prison is a woman. Yes, she is completely evil too, but she should not be in there alone. That the founder of Forchan, Chris Poole, also known as Moot, was in contact with Epstein, including meeting with Epstein the day he created /Pol/. Those familiar with QAnon will remember that it started on /Pol/. I found this article, and it's one of the best breakdowns I've seen so far about what all of this implies and how it connects with the other things we know about Epstein. Can you please explain what /Pol/ is for us not on the know? Political discussion board on 4chan. Some fucking loony shit goes on in there. There's a Wikipedia page about it. That people you see on television regularly, including this week, were emailing with Epstein about child rape and torture videos. The most chilling thing I saw was a very simple email. Everything okay with you? Haven't heard from you in a while. Love the torture video. There's a lot of horrific items in the files, but the casualness. I can't stop thinking about the implications. That the US government is compromised thoroughly by foreign intelligence. We're in the middle of the biggest national security crisis in American history. That every single one of us posting would be in jail until we were found guilty. Then we would be off to prison. We would all be in jail because we would be deemed detrimental and a danger to society. But not these people. The lengths the federal government will go to protect pedophiles. They are at their beck and call. The torture, death, and harm materials are withheld, and yet they say the investigation is over. That the stuff they've released is likely a distraction. It's mostly tip-line bullshit that allows them to write it all off as unverified claims from crazy people, or basic communication that expands the scope to include people from across the political spectrum and add a bunch of noise. But that also means that the real stuff is so heinous this that they're willing to go to all this trouble to obfuscate and distract. They're willing to let out stories about Trump literally doing something to children as long as it muddies the water and gives his base enough to plausibly deny. That these documents detail thoroughly how the rich and the powerful operate, and how they are basically untouchables who run the world. They are the deep state. We live under an illusion that we operate in a world after absolute rulers who operate with no impunity. If anything should completely shatter the myth of a Western rule-based democracy, it's these documents and the fact that everyone in power was either trying to cover them up or were doing nothing to surface them. If the American people let this go, it's over even pretending we live in a free and just society. That many, if not most, of the rich and powerful who control our lives seem to be attracted to boys and girls. And that they don't really care if the aforementioned children consent, not that children can consent in most jurisdictions. Nor do they seem to care who knows about their deranged proclivities. When you have everything you ever wanted, you start to want things you should never want. It's a power thing. The elite like bespoke criminal pleasures because it proves they have power, and they are above the constraints of normal, moral people. Laws, ethics, and norms are for people who don't have power and live within the dictates of civil society. But they are, in their eyes, exceptional men, gods even. And thereby they can cultivate whatever perversions they desire, because no one can tell them no. Because no one has authority over them. I'm still trying to comprehend the fact that so much of the culture war is a literal fucking cabal conspiracy psyop. Like, my brain almost refuses to believe shit can be this fucked. I think it's common for us to remain sane by holding a belief that people who engage in heinous acts are rare and don't fit well into more civilized society. We may imagine a serial killer as someone who lives isolated from society, a rapist as an incel, or someone who murders casually as a member of a mob or gang. We also trust that our government will do its best to keep us safe by trying to find and punish people who do bad things. There are endless stereotypes and assumptions that we maintain to reassure ourselves that our society is safe and sane. What is shocking about these documents is how thoroughly it undermines those assumptions. People are engaging in far more heinous, unthinkable acts than we realized. The people doing those things aren't rare or on the fringes of society. They are the very people whom our society has been elevating to power. It makes us ask deep questions about the nature of our society and its values. It also undermines the assumptions that we make to allow ourselves to feel safe. We no longer can assume that the state is designed to ensure that people who do bad things face consequences. We already knew that the justice system was deeply biased, but this exposes the extent to which some people can freely engage in truly harmful acts. This is from another Redditor, and is sadly accurate. The Epstein Files. A wake-up call beyond left and right. The Epstein Files may not be leading to convictions right now, but what they're accomplishing might be even more important in the long run. These documents are pulling back the curtain on something many suspected but couldn't prove. The political elite protect each other. Despite all the divisive rhetoric, the partisan theater, the endless us versus them battles they broadcast for our consumption, but when it matters, they close ranks. This isn't about conservative versus liberal. It's not about right versus left. It's about billionaires versus the truth. What these files reveal is a class of people who share private islands, travel in the same circles, attend the same parties, and shield each other from accountability, all while keeping the rest of us at each other's throats over policy disagreements they likely don't even care about. They manipulate, they divide. They maintain power by ensuring we never look up long enough to see who's really pulling the strings. The files show us how they lived, how connected they are, how intertwined their networks run across every institution we're told to trust. This is a wake-up call. If we can set aside our policy disagreements, not abandon them, but set them aside long enough to address the rot at the top, we can unite around something bigger. We can demand accountability from people who've operated above the law for decades. Hold your local senators and Congress responsible. Once we change the regime that protects them, we can bring all the files into the light. We can pursue the justice that victims deserve and that the world needs. The division is the product. Unity is the threat they fear most. I think people are still too prefixed on an eyes wide shut, secret billionaire cabal angle. Emo, the story is more that so many people, whether implicated or not, chose to associate with a known freak because of his perceived elitism. World leaders subjecting themselves to abhorrent blackmail opportunities. Former presidents whoring around like a bachelor party. Even if everyone abstained except Epstein, it's a gross reflection of how badly people lust for power. The 4chan ties are the one that wake me up in a cold sweat at night, and I don't think the general public is online enough to really understand what a huge ripple effect that had and how much control over the populist shows they have. The entire conservative online platform, all of the alt-right men screeching about wokeness and feminazis and DEI, and attack helicopter jokes, Gamergate, Quanon, and Pizzagate were all tactically created and propagated by rich men trying to hide their crimes. And the public ate it up, asked for more, and willingly indoctrinated themselves into a cult that no bombshell finding, no new release of documents, not even the evidence of their own eyes will convince them to leave. The crimes are horrific, the victims went through things that are unthinkable, and I'm confident that we haven't even come close to hearing the worst of it. But the thing that haunts me is how well they've set up and tied off this neat little trap by abusing a series of what basically amount to exploits around the logic centers of the human brain, so that a large part of the populace will continue to cheer them on as they march to their own demise. The stories will haunt me, but that truth feels truly existentially horrifying. Donald Trump, the President of the United States, is mentioned over 5,000 times, and these files are being released by a group heavily incentivized to remove him completely. It sure seems like Trump was more or less Epstein's wingman when it came to trafficking and doing something to girls. It's bizarre to me that it's sort of not that big of a deal. I'm a 90s kid. And for anyone not old enough to remember, the only thing politically anyone in this country talked about for a solid year straight was the president getting a blowjob from an intern. Maybe 2 years. It literally defined Bill Clinton's presidency. That the solidarity of the men mentioned is absolute. None of the men mentioned in it have turned on Epstein or anyone else. Bill Clinton could destroy Trump by simply saying, "I submitted that note to the birthday book. There was a real birthday book," but he won't even go that far. Andrew isn't giving anyone up. Chomsky isn't giving anyone up. Bannon isn't giving anyone up. Their solidarity and silence is absolute. Thank you very much for watching. In the comments, write what shocked you the most in the Epstein files. See you next time. Bye.